Good morning. It is an honor and a pleasure to be able to be here today. I was very fond of your grandfather, of his vigilance, of his clarity, of his voice, and his ability to speak for so many who couldn't speak. And I have to thank the important work that MEMRI does, and in partnership with the Lantos Foundation for Human Rights and Justice. And of course, thank you to Speaker Boehner for hosting us today. As the President's Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism in the State Department, I'm charged with both monitoring anti-Semitic incidents and combating such intolerance. I'm doing a hell of a job, aren't I? I've been tracking anti-Semitism around the world and have witnessed its alarming presence and growth. Anti-Semitism is something very personal to me. My father, Rabbi Franz Rosenthal, was arrested on Kristallnacht, the unofficial pogrom that many think started the Holocaust. And he was sent with many of his congregants to prison and then to Buchenwald concentration camp. He was the lucky one. Every other person in his family perished in Auschwitz. And I have dedicated my life to eradicating anti-Semitism and intolerance of all kinds with a sense of urgency and passion that only my father could give me. It's important to recognize efforts of individuals, of government officials, of religious leaders and organizations who speak out against intolerance. Just as Tom Lantos Archives encourages Muslims to speak out against anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial, I have sought to work with all members of society, regardless of religious affiliation, to promote interreligious and interethnic dialogue and action. And I believe that having non-Jews condemning anti-Semitism is far more powerful, as it is when I, as a Jew, condemn hatred of Muslims or Christians or any other vulnerable populations. In facing the increase in the growth of Holocaust denial, I went with 8 leading imams to Dachau and Auschwitz, 2 of which had been Holocaust deniers. My goal was to have them issue a statement condemning Holocaust denial. When we arrived at Dachau, Germany's first concentration camp, the imams were overwhelmed with the pictures they saw and immediately went to the ground in prayer. That was in front of the sculpture that commemorates the extermination of 6 million Jews. And at that moment, I knew that history was being made. All of the passers-by, the tourists, the museum docents stopped in their tracks, and they witnessed the spontaneous prayer of the imams. But Auschwitz was more overwhelming for them. I'd say, for most of them, transformational. We were walking amidst ash and bone fragments that remained there 66 years later. They were there because they were murdered because of who they were. And they were not just bearing witness, they were bearing the burden of understanding what the Holocaust was. They each had their own catharsis there. And my goal for them to produce a condemnation of Holocaust denial was totally surpassed. They issued a unanimous statement, remember 2 of them had been Holocaust deniers, condemning Holocaust denial and all forms of anti-Semitism. And they are now urging their colleagues in schools to join with them. And they're planning to take their youth on the same trip we took, to witness history, to understand it, to teach the power of unanswered hatred and the power that condemnation of such hatred can have. This MEMRI report will serve as an effective tool to other religious leaders and educators to address that hatred, condemn it. And I cannot put words to how useful the materials you produce, MEMRI, are to the work I do as Special Envoy. No government should produce materials that are intolerant of members of any religion, any racial group, any ethnic group, or should teach intolerance of any kind in their educational curriculum. The Department of State continues to focus on this important issue, and we express our concern to other governments that use such hateful lessons in textbooks, which call Jews the children of apes and pigs, and that teach the protocols of the Elders of Zion as a textbook. One of my primary goals this year is to address the issue of intolerance in textbooks and in the media in the Middle East. It's critical to educate our youth about the Holocaust. That goes without saying. While human nature may not have changed, children are not born hating. They are taught to hate. And that's why we have to focus on how that teaching is happening. Many, if not most, of the countries in the Middle East do not teach about the Holocaust. And when I ask their foreign ministers, their ministries of education why, I am told, quote, it might confuse the children, or it may not have happened. At best, it's an exaggeration. Now, how can we expect people to learn the lessons of history if we're not teaching them the history? I've had the opportunity and the honor in this great job of mine to meet with ministers of education, ministers of culture, of information, and I have focused on the Saudi textbooks. And I got the commitments, and I will take them at their word right now, that the language that MEMRI exposes will be changed, that there will be training of teachers. I did not get the commitment from Jordan that the schools will include lessons on the Holocaust or that it even existed. But the Minister of Education looked me in the eyes and said, but we don't teach that it didn't happen. Sometimes I wonder if I'm making things up, so it's wonderful to have other witnesses in these meetings. In Lebanon, I met with many multicultural and interfaith groups that are working hard to advance understanding in the Abrahamic faiths. But what the Lebanese mean in Abrahamic faiths is Muslims and Christians. And so my job is to make sure that they're learning about Jews, that there are Jewish members of the community who are still there and afraid for their lives, are integrated into lessons and into the dialogues and discussions and conversations that Lebanon is trying to have. And everywhere I've gone, it's been because of the documentation that I have, thanks to MEMRI and to the Lantos Foundation, that I am able to show people the reality, the documents, the clips, the words, the quotes, so that people can't look me in the eyes and say, we have no anti-Semitism. Never have, never will. Documentation calls for speaking truth to power. Tom Lantos was a strong advocate against hate. I identify with his resolve to promote acceptance, mutual respect, and tolerance. And I hope that I can continue with the same kind of commitment and dignity that Tom Lantos gave to the subject, gave to creating my job, and gave to the world in demanding people learn history so that they can learn from it. Thank you all for all the good work you're doing.